Rejected at checkout, single mother with baby discovers incredible transformation when CEO steps forward. Claire stood at the checkout line, her heart a drumbeat of anxiety, as the cashier scanned her meager groceries: a few cartons of formula, an overripe banana, and a bag of frozen peas. The price flashed before her eyes, a cruel reminder of her limited means. She swiped her card, hope flickering like a candle in the wind. The screen erupted with a red declined. Mortified, she froze, the eyes of disapproving shoppers boring into her. Desperation twisted in her gut, and she felt like a ghost in a crowd of judgment as shame washed over her and the whispers began. What if they all saw her as she saw herself? A failure. A single mother who couldn't even manage the simplest tasks. Lucy. The thought of her infant daughter modeled Claire's already fragile confidence. She wanted a better life for Lucy, the sort that didn't involve the constant tug of poverty paired with the clutches of self-doubt. Retreating instinctively, Claire reached to gather her groceries, intent on escaping the suffocating atmosphere of scrutiny, yet, in a moment that seemed suspended in time, she caught a glimpse of a man standing a few paces behind her. James Thornton, the CEO of the town's largest tech company. He was a face she knew but didn't dare approach. Instead of flinching away, he stepped forward, an unexpected night. "I can cover your bill," he said, the calmness of his voice unraveling her tension. His kindness sparked something within her, a glimmer of hope mingled with disbelief. Then he offered her a position at his company. A fresh start, perhaps. Her heart raced at the prospect, clashing with the weight of her current reality. Could she truly leave behind the familiarity of her waitressing and cashiering jobs? The thought of advancing, of finally breaking the cycle of hardship, was intoxicating. But the mental battle raged. Was it selfish to pursue her career over the safety of her daughter's stability? As she began to navigate her new role, Claire uncovered a latent skill for coding, something she never ventured into before but found a strange affinity for. This new landscape felt intimidating, her colleagues' skeptical glances prickling her skin. They whispered about her past, the waitress turned coder, each comment chipping away at her spirit. Could they not see the resilience born from years of fighting just to survive? And there was James, observing her every move, threading the needle between encouragement and lofty expectations. Fear coiled in her stomach like a snake, her internal voice echoing doubts. What if I'm not good enough? Preparing for a team meeting one day, Claire felt the weight of their gazes like daggers. But when her moment came, the previously insidious whispers fell silent. She began to articulate her ideas with surprising clarity. It was as if the fear transformed into power, her heart pounding not with panic, but with purpose. The room absorbed her words, the moment suspended as she recalled her struggles as a mother, each syllable carrying the weight of her journey. Applause flickered alive, filling her with a sense of validation she desperately craved. Yet just as soon as it surged, it was joined by a creeping anxiety. Was this truly her moment of transformation, or just a fleeting illusion? Could she keep this up without falling prey to the ghosts of her past? As the echoes of clapping faded away, Claire stood poised on the precipice of not just a career change, but an existential crisis. Did she dare fully embrace this new chapter, or would the remnants of her old life drag her back into shadows from which she so ardently wished to escape? With the world ahead of her in chaotic uncertainty, one thought fought its way to the forefront: how far could she really push herself before breaking? Claire departed the meeting room, her heart still racing from the unexpected applause that punctuated her presentation. The air felt different around her, charged and electrifying, yet tension coiled tightly within her chest. Did they really believe in her, or were they simply applauding her story, not the talent that lay in her words? The shimmering reflection of self-doubt washed over the triumphant moment. As she walked back to her workstation, she sought refuge in the familiar rhythm of coding. The clack of keys beneath her fingers provided a rhythm she craved, a solace from the chaos encroaching at the edges of her mind. Yet, the warmth from the applause seeped away, replaced with the chilling prospect of scrutiny that lay ahead. Her colleagues whispered confidently, punctuating their sentences with casual laughter as they exchanged ideas. Claire, on the periphery, felt the uncertainty in her gut grow heavier. Would they view her as an imposter? A momentary anomaly under the spotlight from a CEO who felt sorry for a single mother. Each murmur dug deeper, and she found herself questioning her place within the new world she was so eager to conquer. Determination sparked within her, pushing her forward as she opened her coding project. The lines of syntax merged in her mind as she grappled to understand, revisiting every lesson learned in the rushed hours outside Lucy's nap schedule. She wrestled with new languages and frameworks, trying to reconcile the glowing version of herself she had portrayed hours earlier with this more vulnerable reality. She had stood up and found her voice, so why did it now feel like she was teetering on the edge of vocal chaos? Days turned to weeks, each a blend of rising hope and accumulating pressure. The team began a new project, one that James was eager about leading. It involved developing a product designed to connect users globally, a task with high stakes and higher expectations. Claire was invited to contribute, a fact that thrilled her and sent waves of failure crashing down. This was the moment of truth. Could she deliver? She poured herself into preparation, analyzing user feedback from past products, gathering insights, and absorbing relevant technical knowledge. But with each passing day, a familiar sensation crept back: fear. She recalled the checkout line, the shame pulsating through her, the weight of judgment felt inescapable. Would that moment define her forever? In a pivotal team meeting, she watched James stand at the helm, commanding respect from every member while she sat, anxiety churning, waiting for her moment again. As discussions unfolded, her heart raced at every pause, every question posed. Finally, called upon to share her thoughts, Claire opened her mouth, but the silence between her heart and her voice stretched interminably. Where was the fire she had summoned before? But then an image crossed her mind: Lucy's warm smile, her baby coos. They became her anchor, reminding her what was at stake. With newfound resolve, Claire began to speak, each word gathering strength as she proposed a user-friendly interface to enhance engagement, pulling from her authentic understanding as a new mother navigating apps designed for families. Just as her confidence began to surge, she met James's eyes, noticing the subtle spark of surprise in his expression. "That's an interesting angle," he acknowledged, turning to the rest of the team. The nod felt like validation, yet the fear of being too ambitious bubbled beneath. What if they didn't view her insights as genuine? Days later, as she prepared her own project proposal, she was confronted with an unexpected email from James, inviting her to present at the upcoming company-wide meeting. Her stomach twisted. This was no ordinary presentation, it would determine her fate within the company. That night, sprawled upon her couch with Lucy beside her, the weight of self-doubt threatened to suffocate her. In the dim glow of her laptop, she rehearsed 100 times over, but each iteration was laced with chilling visions of failure. The moment loomed closer, and Claire faced her reflection in the window, the backlit city suggesting limitless potential. The decision settled heavily on her shoulders. Did she step fully onto the path before her, or hide behind the shadows of her insecurities? As the day broke, she knew she was at the brink of a reckoning. How would she seize the opportunity, or would she crumble once more under the weight of expectations? The stage awaited her, but so did the specter of her past. Desperation clawed at her, propelling her toward clarity just when she thought she could falter again. But deep in her spirit, a question ached: would she allow fear to dictate her journey, or could she rewrite her narrative? The path seemed fraught with danger, yet just on the other side lurked a tantalizing freedom. The moment of truth approached, and Claire was unyielding in her resolve. Would she rise, or would she hesitate? Claire awoke that morning with a sense of urgency blooming in her chest, mingling with the remnants of unease. The air whispered of possibilities unfurling just beyond her grasp. Today's presentation was not merely a professional milestone, it was the battleground for her self-worth. She caught fleeting glimpses of Lucy, cooing and bright-eyed, as afternoon light filtered through their apartment. This innocence reminded Claire of her obligation not just to herself, but to her daughter. As she prepared for the day, Claire's mind spun with last-minute revisions. Each slide in her presentation felt heavy with potential. She could sense the weight of their expectations. Her pulse quickened at the thought of twinkling eyes peering into hers, waiting for her to distill her ideas into words that could ignite a spark. Failure rippled through her thoughts like a jagged stone disrupting still water. In the elevator on the way to the meeting, Claire steadied herself. A rhythmic breathing technique she had read about floated into her mind. Inhale confidence, she whispered internally. Exhale doubt. The words buzzed around her, becoming an inner mantra, albeit shaky. Still, they provided a small tether against the gale of anxiety threatening to sweep her away. Upon entering the meeting room, the atmosphere buzzed. Colleagues exchanged glances, some whispering quietly while others animatedly discussed the upcoming projects. James stood at the front, his usual charisma almost overpowering in this setting. Claire noted the slight crease of concentration on his brow, and it ignited a flicker of determination within her. The room filled as the head of the department settled into his chair, a signal that all eyes would soon be on her. When it was her turn, Claire walked to the front with resolute steps, her heart thundering in counterpoint to her confidence mantra. The projector flickered to life, illuminating her carefully crafted slides and intricate tapestry of ideas and innovations. As she began, she allowed herself to momentarily forget the audience. This was not just a presentation, it was a story, her story. A story that entwined the challenges of motherhood with a deep understanding of the market. It's not just about usability, she said, her voice steady despite the weight of scrutiny pressing down. It's about creating an emotional connection. Apps cater to functionality, but I know what it feels like to navigate that space as a parent seeking safe and engaging environments for our children. As she spoke, Claire's confidence built. She traced the arcs of her narrative, weaving in personal anecdotes alongside data-driven insights. Time seemed to stretch, each word cementing her presence before them. The transformation she had longed for unfurled. She was no longer just the single mother who had faltered in a checkout line. She was a professional, a woman with unique insights and tangible expertise to share. The room was still when she finished. For a heartbeat, silence enveloped her, a quiet tension hanging in the air before James's eyes sparkled with appreciation. You've brought a compelling perspective to the table, he acknowledged. The team murmured approval, a wave of shared understanding washing over them, yet, beneath this moment of triumph lay an undercurrent of uncertainty. Could this validation stand firm against her old insecurities? Claire knew the answer would be tested in the upcoming weeks as their project developed. Validation was fragile and dissipated too easily in the heat of criticism. After the meeting, Claire felt more than relief, she sensed a heaviness begin to lift. She had met the moment. Yet, amidst the uplift there lingered a shadow of apprehension. How would she maintain this momentum? The stakes were higher than just delivering a successful proposal, it was about sustaining authenticity in a world that often demanded conformity. Later that night, she sat in the glow of her laptop, her mind racing through the possibilities. What if she could transform her initial insights into a series of workshops? What if she could cultivate a community of designers and developers who shared similar backgrounds? The thought unfurled like a banner in her mind, tantalizing and audacious, but as the ideas swirled, doubt crept back, gnawing at the edges of her hope. Would the corporate environment embrace a fresh voice, or would it stifle her and reinforce her fears? The revelation hit her hard. She had to push beyond her comfort zone, to confront the limits she had unconsciously set. As Claire stared at her screen, a resolve solidified within her. She could no longer afford to be cautious. The moment of a fresh possibility beckoned under the glow of her screen. What was she willing to risk to pursue this vision? As she leaned closer to her keyboard, heart racing, the next step loomed ominously. Would she take the plunge into uncharted waters, or would she retreat, paralyzed by the creeping fear that had dogged her for so long? The late hours of the night swirled around Claire as she sat poised before the bright screen, the cursor blinking impatiently at her. Ideas flooded her mind, competing for dominance amid her lingering self-doubt. A few moments were lost to inaction, her fingers hovering momentarily before she finally tapped out the beginnings of her workshop proposal. Still, fear pricked at her resolve. Could she really muster the audacity to step beyond her designated lane? The meticulously crafted diagrams she had once cradled in her mind now felt heavy with expectation, transforming into weights dragging her resolve downward. Yet, she knew something vital had changed within her. The resonance of her presentation still echoed in her ears, urging her forward. "You've brought a compelling perspective to the table." Those words lingered like a lighthouse beam cutting through dense fog. With every meticulous correction to her draft, she felt the intensity of her passion shift from theory into palpable action. Each sentence became a declaration of intent, wrapping itself around her aspirations like a warm embrace. Claire envisioned herself creating not just a workshop, but an incubator for ideas, a sanctuary for those navigating their own complexities in the tech world. Much like her OWN.AS, the night drew deeper, a startling idea struck her, igniting a fresh surge of energy. What if she not only opened the doors to her own experience but also harnessed the collective stories of others? Collaboration could amplify voices often drowned by the louder, more polished narratives in her field. It was a revelation, awakening a sense of purpose that pulsed through her veins. She could form a platform for developers, designers, and mothers to share their journeys, struggles, insights, and successes. Instinctively, her mind began crafting a more expansive vision. It would be a supportive space empowering individuals to lean into their narratives, cultivate innovation, and confront the industry's predilection for uniformity. But excitement quickly yielded to consideration. Would colleagues view this venture as valuable or merely a distraction from their corporate priorities? Claire wrestled with thoughts. Who was she to transform the landscape when she had so precariously fought for her place within it? Yet, she understood that she couldn't shrink within her insecurities. She had to nurture this blossoming vision. With a towering wave of determination, she opened a new document, titled Empowerment Through Diversity Workshops. As the words pulsed onto the page, she outlined her vision with clarity. She sketched the framework: guest speakers, networking sessions, shared learning experiences. The proposal came alive alongside her growing confidence that it was nearly dawn when Claire finally leaned back, surveying her work. The anticipation crackled in the air, a wild tangle of excitement and trepidation. She had drawn a roadmap toward potential transformation, yet the specter of backlash loomed. What if her peers rebuffed this notion? Who would dare invest in a narrative so deeply entwined with personal experience? And yet, knitting the fabric of her intention with the tenacity she had sharpened just hours earlier, she began to formulate a plan. She would present her workshop idea at the next team meeting, positioning it as an opportunity to expand their work and connect on a deeper level, a union of professional growth and authenticity. The thought was electrifying, yet daunting. Would her honesty and conviction earn respect, or would the idea sink under waves of skepticism? As Claire wrestled with these possibilities, realization began to settle around her. The struggle was not just external. It was a battle against her own internal barriers. She had to confront her fear head-on. Desire clashed with doubt, but exhaustion crept in, urging her to surrender to sleep's embrace. Yet as she drifted off, she clutched the vision tightly, promising herself to glide into the unknown. The next day would be pivotal, either affirming her path or challenging her to forge ahead. But a thought flickered hauntingly in her mind: what if the real obstacle was less about others' perceptions and more about the uncharted territories of her own potential? The dawn awoke with an unsettling energy, whispering that today's confrontation would be greater than simple acceptance. It was a confrontation she had cultivated within herself. Would she stand tall, unflinching, ready to carve out the place she both desired and feared? The fluorescent lights of the conference room buzzed as Claire stepped inside, her heart racing in rhythm with each echoing footfall. She could feel the weight of her proposal nestled in her folder, its pages crisp and fervent with possibilities. As she took her seat at the long table, the familiar faces around her appeared unfazed, engrossed in their discussions about quarterly figures and deadline pressure. But beneath that layer of normalcy, Claire sensed a rising tide of tension, a shared apprehension about being vulnerable in a space so often fortified by pretense. Silence fell, a natural lull urging Claire forward. She cleared her throat, wrestling the nerves that gripped her tightly. This wasn't just a pitch, it felt like an unveiling, a challenge to her very identity as a professional. She was terrified but no longer willing to retreat into the safety of obscurity. Raising her hand, she called for attention, the murmur of the room dwindling into curiosity. "Thank you for your time today. I want to share something that's been a driving force for me in our field: the idea of weaving our individual experiences into collaborative growth. Fingers trembling slightly, she revealed the document detailing her vision for empowerment through diversity workshops. Her voice steadied with conviction, each word carrying a pulse of intention. The audience listened, expressions shifting from skepticism to intrigue as she spoke of storytelling as a catalyst for innovation. Describing her aspirations, Claire painted a picture of an inclusive environment where ideas flourished outside traditional boundaries, but even as her passion surged, the specter of doubt hovered. She could perceive glances exchanged among her peers and knew they were weighing the merit of her proposal against the backdrop of their corporate responsibilities. The fear of dismissal threatened to fracture her carefully constructed narrative. What if experimentation wasn't welcomed? What if she exposed herself for nothing? Claire, a voice interrupted her thoughts. It was David, a senior executive known for his incisive critiques. This sounds great, but how do we know this won't just distract us from our primary goals? We have deadlines and quotas to meet. Her breath caught. The question felt like a fierce punch, striking at the very heart of her proposal. Instead of unraveling, Claire recognized the moment as a crucible. She could feel the stakes rising. Every single groundbreaking advance in tech has stemmed from collaboration and understanding diverse perspectives, she began, leaning into the challenge. Imagine if we could leverage personal narratives to strengthen our strategies. Not every aspect of our growth can be quantified. Sometimes, it's about emergence. The room buzzed as her colleagues began to weigh in, voices mixing in a debate ripe with skepticism and curiosity. Her heart raced again, but this time it was exhilaration fueled by urgency. They were engaged, responding to something deeper that she had ignited. Claire realized each point raised was an opportunity she could build upon, transforming resistance into a dialogue of enhancement. Yet as excitement mounted, one question lingered in her mind: could she maintain this energy through the inevitable objections that would arise? The challenge before her was not just to win over her colleagues but to inspire them to see beyond the immediate need for profit and deadlines. As discussions flowed, the day wore on, and she felt empowered, if still strained. She knew this initial conversation was only the beginning. Despite their attempts at logical reasoning, her determination countered their skepticism with a fervor that shook the introductory foundations laid long ago. She could sense the shift. Perhaps this was the crack in the fortress of conformity she had sought, yet inwardly, Claire grappled with an undeniable fear. Would this small flame of hope sustain itself against the heavy winds of industry convention? Would she be strong enough to guard her dream against the inevitable storms of critique that would follow? As the meeting adjourned, she caught a glimpse of David's contemplative expression. He was silent, still chewing over her ideas. There lay the possibility of a pivotal connection, a spark she could nurture into something transformative, but now, the burning question loomed larger: could she craft her individual journey into a collective awakening that would challenge the status quo? The march to her vision was under no illusions, and as she prepared to navigate this treacherous terrain, she felt the surge of determination. It was a call to confront who she truly was amid an inevitable wave of resistance. Would she rally the diverse narratives around her, transforming fear into unity? Or would the relentless tides of conformity sweep her voice back into obscurity? Claire returned to her desk, the hum of the conference room fading into the background, yet the adrenaline of the meeting coursed through her veins. She opened her folder and stared at the proposal, the pages now marked with the ink of her commitment. It felt both exhilarating and terrifying to have laid bare her ambitions, but the echoes of doubt still haunted her. Would this effort resonate enough to shift the perspective of those who held the power to enact change? Hours later, she found herself alone, staring at her computer screen as emails trickled into her inbox. Her colleagues had resumed their routines, but Claire felt the weight of her aspirations hanging palpably in the air. Every chime felt like an opportunity or a threat. There was still a world outside that conference table that expected her to conform, to play it safe, to deliver results without questioning the how or the why. As she worked, the worries began to crystallize into a plan. She needed more than just persuasive words, she needed proof, tangible examples to bolster her vision. Claire had seen how collaboration sparked innovation during her tenure at previous companies, but embedding these principles into the culture was a different beast altogether. Could she really illustrate her ideas with real case studies that demonstrated not just success, but growth born from vulnerability? A sudden, faint knock on her door pulled her from her thoughts. It was David, his brows slightly furrowed, unusual for someone so often self-assured in meetings. "Got a minute?" he asked, stepping in uninvited but not unwelcome. "Of course," Claire replied, straightening in her chair. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier," he began, his tone more subdued than the usual confrontational cadence she expected from him. "You made some good points, particularly about leveraging personal narratives. I've seen those workshops work in other contexts in creative fields primarily. I didn't realize that it could apply in tech as well." Claire's heart quickened. This was an opening, one she needed to seize. "Exactly. Those anecdotes foster trust and an openness that could drive our teams to innovate more effectively. But I need your insight. If we frame it that way, perhaps we can quantify engagement metrics that align with productivity." David nodded slowly, his eyes scanning the room as if weighing her proposition. "Let us be honest here, Claire. It's unconventional for our industry. Will the higher-ups back it? You'll need their buy-in, especially if changes don't yield immediate results." Her momentum threatened to stall, but instead of wavering, she leaned into the fear. "What if we experiment with a single team first? A test run, if you will. If we can show improvement there, it could serve as a micro-model for the company." For a moment, the silence between them felt charged, laden with both possibility and risk. David appeared lost in thought, his internal debate evident on his face. Claire could almost see the calculations bubbling behind his eyes, the pros and cons weighing against each other. After a beat, he spoke again. "If you can draft a measurable plan, one that satisfies both our objectives and proves the worth of engagement, I might be able to convince them to pilot it." Claire felt her spirits lift, but with that ascension came a haunting reminder of the stakes involved. "If it fails on our watch, it could end my chances, or," he interrupted, "it could redefine how we approach what it means to lead in this company. You have a chance to pivot how we perceive productivity, Claire. Don't lose sight of that." As he left her desk, Claire was imbued now not only with ambition but renewed hope. She dove into drafting a detailed framework, balancing metrics that examined engagement and productivity. Hours slipped by, but with each word she crafted, something heavyweight was shifting within her. Confidence, perhaps. She was taking action, and it felt alive, but as she was piecing everything together, a nagging thought lingered: what if she lacked the support from the higher-ups, even if she had David's backing? The pressure of the expansive unknown loomed larger than before, casting shadows on her quest. With the clock ticking down to another team meeting, Claire could feel the intensity build in her chest. She was on the brink of a breakthrough if only the company could recognize the value of blending the personal with the professional. She was determined to push through, yet questions danced through her mind, dangerous and vibrant. What if all it took to alter the course of her career was one bold move? The stakes had never felt higher. This was her chance to transform her vision into reality, but the specter of potential rejection wouldn't leave her side. Would clear eyes see beyond the numbers, recognizing the human elements her proposal aimed to cultivate? Would she ignite the spark needed to embolden her colleagues, or would fear extinguish her shape-shifting ambitions before they could touch the surface? As Claire meticulously detailed her proposal, the quiet hum of the office felt like a distant echo, one that was both reassuring and isolating. She was teetering on the edge of her personal evolution, balancing the fine line between ambition and trepidation. The rhythmic clicking of her keyboard pulsed like the heartbeat of her ideas coming to life. Each metric and narrative she crafted became a stepping stone towards something greater, an affirmation of her belief in the transformative power of vulnerability in leadership, yet, an undercurrent of self-doubt gnawed at her resolve. The stakes were high, and with no guarantee of success, the fear of being dismissed loomed like a specter. Driven by equal parts determination and anxiety, Claire refocused her mind. She visualized what a successful pilot could look like: engagement metrics soaring, employees inspired, and a shift in culture brewing. She pulled out her phone and fastened her grip on the keyboard, reminding herself that innovation rarely flourished in a vacuum, it erupted where risk met opportunity. A sudden thought struck her: perhaps David could provide more than just initial support, he might be crucial in fostering wider acceptance among their colleagues. Compelled by newfound clarity, Claire pushed back her chair and made her way down the hall toward the open workspace where David often collaborated with his team. She needed to incorporate his strengths and insights into her own framework. It wouldn't just be about the proposal anymore, it would be a collaborative endeavor, a fusion of ideas that would strengthen her standing among peers. As she approached, she saw David deep in discussion with a small group, their voices harmonizing around a whiteboard cluttered with colorful markers and sketches. Standing near the entrance, Claire hesitated, afraid of interrupting a significant moment. A strand of doubt crept in again. What if they viewed her intruding as desperate, rather than proactive? Exhaling softly, Claire tapped into her resolve once more and stepped forward, clearing her throat lightly. She called out to David, who glanced in her direction and broke into a welcoming smile. "Hey Claire. Just brainstorming some new features we have lined up for next quarter. Want to join in?" The warmth in his tone eased her nerves, and she walked over, engaging with the team who greeted her with nods. As she unfolded her thoughts, each idea around the table morphed into a dynamic exchange, their insights blending with her vision in real time. It felt liberating. She was no longer alone in her quest, yet, beneath the camaraderie was a gnawing reminder of the potential backlash from the higher-ups. Claire's heart raced as she circled back to her proposal. "I'm asking for a trial run in our department, focusing on personal narratives to foster engagement. If we show that it leads to tangible improvement in team dynamics and productivity, it could be a game changer for the entire company." David's brow furrowed, but this time it was not in doubt, it was a manifestation of pondering the implications. "You're aware this may not sit well with everyone. Some might label it touchy-feely, a risk on our part, especially if it doesn't work." "Yes, but isn't that the very essence of innovation?" She met his gaze, finding the steadiness she needed to assert her perspective. "If we fear failure, we'll never begin to move forward." The room stilled, the energy shifting as her words clicked into place. The group pondered her point, and she could feel them reframing their own hesitations. Claire's confidence burgeoned, solidifying like concrete, but the moment of unity crackled with tension. Behind their supportive nods lay the unvoiced doubts of higher authorities, the potential for failure still hovering like a cloud. Would they ultimately embrace her vision, or would it be quashed before it had the chance to breathe? As the meeting concluded, she felt revitalized, yet remains acutely aware of the storm brewing beyond their small gathering. The boardroom awaited her with its formidable figures, each a gatekeeper with the power to change her trajectory. Claire was ready to challenge that authority, yet uncertainty wrapped around her like a shroud. Would she indeed meet the expectation of transformation, or would her bold initiative fall silently like an unmarked stone cast into the depths? With her mind racing and ideas swirling, Claire knew she was at the juncture of defining not just her proposal but her identity. For all her planning, she was perilously close to facing the pivotal question: could she truly transcend the chains of conformity in her pursuit of genuine connection within her workplace? Tomorrow's presentation at the boardroom could shift everything. It would be the moment she would either emerge feared and admired or extinguished like a flickering flame. Would she summon the courage to push through, or would she crumble under the weight of expectation? Waking before dawn, Claire felt the weight of the day pressing down on her. The early morning light streamed through her window in soft, golden rays, illuminating the room and highlighting its disarray. Unwashed dishes lingered in the sink, remnants of a hastily prepared dinner as she had been consumed by her work. She often found herself torn between the roles of a dedicated employee and a devoted mother, and the feat of balancing both felt Herculean. As she prepared her oatmeal, her thoughts spiraled back to the boardroom presentation. The thrill of last night's collaboration with David still coursed through her, but it was accompanied by doubt. What if her ideas were dismissed? How would she confront the inevitable resistance from the higher-ups who remained steeped in traditional methodologies? Forcefully aligning her thoughts, she reminded herself about the fragility of progress. There was beauty in vulnerability, but it was a risk she had to take. Sitting down at her kitchen table, Claire opened her notebook and reviewed her key points. Each bullet spoke to her desire not only to contribute but to lead. Engagement, narrative, and vulnerability felt alive on the page. Words she had to own. As she wrote, her fingers trembling slightly, conjured glimpses of how her presentation could ignite a paradigm shift regarding how their company viewed employee engagement. It could be the beginning of a change that might resonate beyond her own aspirations. Still, anxiety hollered within her. Would the board appreciate her fervor, her mix of personal and professional experience? She felt conflicted, her past breeding both resilience and fear. Each fear loomed larger. They whispered tales of earlier attempts at change that had resulted in disillusionment rather than success. Yet amid the chaos of her uncertainties, reaffirmation clawed at her heart. Wasn't he the very essence of being human, imbued with trial and error? Change was inherently intertwined with risk. As she sipped her coffee, her son's soft cooing from the other room reminded her of what truly mattered. The thought sparked something deep within Claire, a reservoir of courage she had not known existed. He depended on her, not just as a mom, but as a role model, demonstrating that boundaries were meant to be challenged. This moment of clarity shifted the landscape of her fear into fertile ground for growth. Claire felt a surge of motivation, a flicker of defiance against the lingering specter of doubt haunting her mind. Rising from the table, she found herself pacing, drafting in her head responses to potential critiques, envisioning her defense of her proposal not just against pushback but even dismissal. What if she reframed the risks associated with vulnerability not as liabilities but as genuine opportunities to reshape empowerment among her peers? As the clock ticked on, Claire showered and dressed in a tailored blazer that made her feel both professional and powerful. Staring at herself in the mirror, she adjusted the collar of her jacket, an armor of sorts. She realized she was not just a mother or an employee, she was a changemaker. Taking a deep breath, she gathered her materials, notes, charts, and her very heart encased in the presentation. With every step she took towards the office, a mantra formed: I am worthy. I am capable. Grounding herself in this newfound affirmation, she prepared herself for the inevitable pushback yet allowed room for emergent possibilities. Sitting across from her team in the boardroom felt like standing in the eye of a hurricane, calm in her purpose even as the elements swirled around her with uncertainty. The moments before the presentation brought new tension, tangible like a taut string ready to snap, but Claire's resolve only hardened. Then, just as she was about to speak, she caught sight of the executives. Chief among them was Ruth, the company's CEO, whose reputation for being an astute and, at times, unyielding decision-maker loomed. The moment froze, the air heavy with unspoken expectations. Could Claire rise to meet them? Would this be the moment she demonstrated not just her boundless ambition, but a quiet confidence that might shift perceptions? As she opened her mouth, ready to embark on a narrative that could transform her life and her company, a simple thought struck her: this could be the beginning of everything, or the end. With the stakes unbearably high, Claire took a breath and launched into her presentation, unaware of how the real challenge was yet to come. Would her vision ignite a path toward radical change, or would her efforts be subdued by the very forces she sought to transform? The initial words fell from Claire's lips, her voice steady yet laced with an underlying tremor of fear. As she outlined her vision for employee engagement, focusing on personalization and the power of narrative, she felt herself settling into a rhythm. The room, though filled with skeptical gazes, felt surprisingly intimate in its silence. Yet, that sense of closeness was a double-edged sword. Each stare seemed to come with expectations, scrutinizing the very fabric of her proposal. Midway through her presentation, Claire caught Ruth's penetrating gaze. The CEO was notorious for her quick critiques and searing disapproval. As Claire outlined the potential benefits of vulnerability in the workplace, how authenticity could lead to a more cohesive team, she couldn't shake the sensation that Ruth was probing for weaknesses. What would be enough to convince the board? Would her heartfelt approach be perceived as naive? Suddenly, one of the board members interjected, his voice steady and authoritative. "You're suggesting that we invest time in storytelling as a method for boosting employee morale?" Isn't that a bit unorthodox? The atmosphere tensed like a drawn bowstring. Sweat trickled down Claire's spine, but she took a calming breath. These were the moments she had rehearsed in her mind, the moments that tested not only her ideas but her core resolve. Actually, Claire began, carefully selecting her words, storytelling isn't simply about entertainment. It's about connecting on an emotional level. When people share their experiences, they create a culture of empathy. Isn't that essential in the fast-paced, often isolated environment we operate in? Her heart hammered against her ribs. Every word she spoke was a step into uncharted territory, a venture into confrontation with the status quo. Yet something in her tone shifted, an ember of conviction reigniting. This was not just about her presentation, it was about advocating for change that meant something. Let us consider the numerous times we've seen company morale plummet after a restructuring. The pain is often dismissed as a necessary sacrifice. But with effective communication narratives that honor deprecation alongside resilience, employees can better navigate transitions. They can choose to be engaged rather than defeated. A few heads nodded in acknowledgement. She felt a pulse of life in the room, a flicker of understanding kindling a connection. Was she actually being heard? But Ruth was not easily swayed. It sounds idealistic, Claire. How do we measure this? How do we know it will work? The striking question cut through the air, heavy and forceful. Claire paused, heart racing as she faced the CEO's hardened mask. This was the confrontation she dreaded, the very crux of her fears brought to the forefront. Brushstrokes of self-doubt encroached on her confidence. Could she satiate Ruth's demands for quantifiable results fueled by an emotional proposition? For a heartbeat, her thoughts spiraled. This was about more than charts and data, it was about human experience, both hers and others. What if, she responded at length, we consider engagement as data worth measuring beyond KPIs? Imagine conducting surveys that allow employees to tell their stories, to express their feelings about changes in real time. Shift the methodology from strict metrics to metrics infused with meaning. The room was electric, she could feel the shift beneath her feet. But Ruth's expression remained inscrutable, a silent judge weighing evidence in her mind. Claire's heart pounded, desperation driving her forward. Storytelling can lead to deeper engagement, providing metrics that reflect true employee sentiment rather than just numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about qualitative insights into our workforce. Ruth finally flickered with intrigue, but skepticism still clouded her eyes. Claire's stomach knotted. Would the CEO ever embrace what she believed in? Would a nuanced approach ever hold weight against traditional analytical frameworks? The atmosphere shifted again, the pivotal moment looming. Could she forge a connection with Ruth and the board, challenging the walls of conventional thinking? As Claire wrapped up her presentation, she felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with uncertainty. Would her vulnerability expose her to further rejection, or ignite the flame of transformation she so desperately sought? The meeting ended without closure, feedback postponed to a later date, leaving Claire with simmering questions. As she gathered her notes and stepped out of the boardroom, her mind raced with implications still echoing with Ruth's lingering gaze. Would this profound encounter blossom into opportunity or fester into regret? That evening, standing beside her son's crib, she found solace in the simplicity of being a mother. Yet, beneath that joy shimmered the haunting complexity of her professional ambitions battling her personal fears. The path before her appeared uncertain, yet she felt an awakening, a commitment to pursue authenticity despite the risks. Tomorrow she would strategize, not just for the board, but for herself. Was it too naive to think she could bridge the worlds of home and ambition? And then, spiraling thoughts coalesced around one possible truth: real transformation required daring to confront the familiar. What would true authenticity cost, and would he be worth it? The new day beckoned, and Claire felt a jolt of urgency. Adjusting her plans over coffee, she turned back to her notes, focusing on redefining both her proposals and herself. The time had come to confront not just Ruth, but her own fears that held her back from authentic self-advocacy. As she penned ideas for her next approach, a singular phrase came to her mind: What if I pursued this change not just for my company, but as a testament to my journey? Her gut tightened. Change was never easy. But who was she if not the sum of her courage? With resolve sparking anew, Claire prepared for the next battle, knowing fully well that the hardest confrontations often yielded the most profound transformations. The following months unfolded with a mix of anticipation and anxiety, each day drawing Claire closer to the realization that she had not only encountered change but had also become an active force in shaping it. The board's decision regarding her proposal initially hung like a cloud suspended and far from concrete. But days turned into weeks, and that cloud began to dissipate like mist yielding to daylight. Finally, at a quarterly meeting, Claire was summoned to present the findings from the pilot program she had engineered. Engaging her colleagues through storytelling had reshaped their approach to collaboration and innovation. Employees reported increased morale and deeper connections among teams. The metrics were no longer purely statistical, they were backed by the compelling narratives of individuals who had shared their personal stories and professional insights. On that day, as she stood before her peers, Claire felt waves of confidence wash over her. She was no longer simply the single mother who had hesitated under the scrutiny of judgment, she was a leader, someone who had empowered herself and others through vulnerability. The narrative she had crafted transformed not just her career trajectory but the culture of her workplace. Before she began, she glanced around the room. James, who had once been her lifeline in challenging times, sat at the front with a knowing smile, pride radiating from him like warmth on a sunny day. The murmurs of curiosity rippled through the colleagues who once doubted her. Each familiar face was now a testament to the journey they had embarked upon together. Claire exhaled deeply. Today was not just about her efforts but a celebration of collective progress. As she launched into her presentation, each point was meticulously woven with both data and narrative. True engagement, she articulated, is no longer just about hitting quotas. It's about understanding the human story behind each employee, cultivating a workplace where every voice has value, and every narrative inspires creativity. The room fell silent, every eye fixed on her. For the first time, Claire was no longer afraid of scrutiny, she embraced it, drawing on the strength of her own transformation. When she concluded, applause erupted, echoing across the conference room. People leaped from their seats, not merely acknowledging her efforts but recognizing the potential of what their collective narrative could produce. In that moment, Claire felt the weight of years of self-doubt unfurling from her shoulders, freeing her spirit to soar. She stepped forward to receive congratulations, her heart swelling with pride. Yet this triumph was not merely personal, it signified monumental change within her entire workplace. David approached her, a wide grin plastered across his face, enthusiasm emanating. "I knew you could do it," he exclaimed. "You've shifted the entire paradigm. We're calling it a success." The values of empathy and storytelling were no longer dismissed as touchy-feely but valued as instrumental to innovation. The higher-ups began to discuss expanding Claire's workshop model across departments, creating spaces where employees could vocalize their experiences and encourage a culture of openness. In the following weeks, the ripple effects were undeniable. Other employees stepped into leadership roles, emboldened by Claire's journey. They shared their own stories, fostering an environment where vulnerability became a strength, not a liability. The formerly rigid company culture now buzzed with creativity and collaboration, each person feeling empowered to bring their full selves to work. Through every interaction, Claire reinforced her newfound identity. She was not just a coder but a catalyst for change. This affirmation solidified her professional standing, transitioning her from the role of a newcomer to one recognized for her insightful contributions. Ultimately, Claire's journey had led her to forge deep connections not only with her colleagues but also with her own sense of self. She had transformed from someone who viewed herself through the narrow lens of societal judgment to a figure inspiring others to embrace authenticity. As the months progressed, she earned a promotion, a title that felt less like an achievement and more like a fitting acknowledgement of her evolution. Her confidence was established not merely by authority but by the respect she had garnered from everyone around her. Finally, one evening after putting Lucy to bed, Claire reflected on her spectacular transformation. She smiled at the thought that she had conquered her insecurities. It was achieved through relentless effort and unwavering determination, and the fear that once crippled her had turned into a beacon guiding her forward. With a heart full of gratitude and newfound purpose, Claire opened her laptop, poised to draft the next chapter of her journey. It was time to launch her own initiative that would connect her passion for tech with empowerment workshops, facilitating a community for struggling individuals in her field just like herself. The horizon was brimming with potential, a bright new world where she could continue to challenge not just her past but also inspire countless others to seize their destinies. Claire had arrived, solidified her competence, and demonstrated how resilience could transform into real achievement, forever altering the course of her life. Now, she was ready. The call to action rang true. She would not only rewrite her script but help others compose theirs. The moment had arrived, and there was no turning back. Now, if you resonate with Claire's journey of transformation, you need to subscribe now. Don't wait even one more second to be part of these incredible stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and ensure we continue sharing profound tales of personal growth. We want to hear your reactions and theories about Claire's path, so comment below. And remember, share instantly with at least 5 friends who need to be inspired by this life-changing conclusion. This is the moment to show your support.